Kia ora and welcome to Politics from Canterbury, or should I say today, Geopolitics from Canterbury, because it's the whole world we're talking about. We've got Associate Professor Peter Field to add some intellectual rigour, and Liam Foster, historian and just Canterbury dude. I'm just going to chuck it out there because I speak too much in these, so I'm going to say we're talking about New Zealand and defence. Did anyone follow Andrew Little in his defence this week?
No.
Yes, good. Okay, so we're kind of moving a little closer to America. Would that be correct, Peter?
Well, I think Andrew Little identified two threats. And I think the issue is how New Zealand, Aotearoa, wants to position itself in relation to those two large threats.
What are the two threats?
Not that there aren't others. And one would be largely China and China's position, particularly in this region. Of course, Australia has been in this game for quite a while. And then the second one is climate, right? And that climate's a threat. And
climate change, because I was chatting to someone and they said that climate change is always used by New Zealand as part of the way that we position ourselves, whereas Australia in their recent defence review didn't bother with the climate too much. It was just mainly about China, I think.
That's right, but the United States is not so. For the Biden administration, it's quite clear, and Mark Milley is sort of the chief advisor here and now in charge of the military, that climate is one of the great issues for the military and military preparedness. So I think Andrew Little in that way is quite close to the United States, if unintended.
Is that due to the potential conflicts coming out of global disturbance due to global warming, or is it that the army would be used in response to, say, weather or extreme weather events?
Right. So I guess the job of the military is to be prepared, not just the Boy Scouts. And being prepared would mean, I guess, for both exigencies in their own way, that fighting over resources might be exacerbated because of climate change and issues, I guess, that would be more related to, national defense.
It's not really to stop hordes of people whose countries have become too hot invading New Zealand, is it? I mean, it's quite confusing when they mention climate change. I just want to kick that out a little bit more. The other one I heard is the worry that maybe Taiwan gets blockaded, maybe there's a war in the South China Straits. I guess I just want to push it out. What do you think New Zealand's trade representatives think of this? Because we're pushing all this effort into doing trade with China and opening up. And then we're saying, but maybe we're aligning a little bit more with Australia. So this is why when you listen to these interviews, and we're playing it in the background, Jack Tame with Andrew Little, it's quite a hard watch. Everyone speaks softly. They use words that aren't really, it's all geopolitics words. It's all words that you don't really follow. That's the thing. What is defence? Why don't we just come out and say we're doing this for that?
Well, it's great questions. I'm not sure your view, Liam, on these things, but absolutely, we actually struggle, I think, to follow some of the issues of short-term defense, long-term defense, and how about economic interest, resource interest, that would all play into protecting in some way New Zealand's vital interests. Sometimes those are contradictory. You hear very different things from Andrew Little one day and another day, and from one part of Labour and another part of Labour, and national as well.
Well, I'll bring Liam in.
Yeah,
the debate. We're having a debate because Andrew Little wants a debate. So you're a reasonably clued up guy, but maybe with this issue...
the only thing I really know about New Zealand and Australia's attitudes towards China and how they differ is any criticism of human rights issues in China and military issues resulted... so the Australian government actively criticised the Chinese government, I think, the treatment of the Uyghur population, and then the Chinese government retaliated by implementing trade tariffs.
Yeah, they didn't buy their wine.
Yeah, so I think because New Zealand, China's New Zealand's largest trading partner, that there's this absolute fear of, I think, coming out too confidently and to either criticise or to kind of back a military pact against China.
We'll wrap this up because, as I said in many of our previous podcasts, we're a succinct podcast, so we're going to move on quite quickly. But Helen Clark sent out a number of tweets, and I'll read the first tweet, and I'm going to put them up on Scoop. Helen Clark's first tweet about this was, Defence policy and security strategy documents released in Wellington suggest New Zealand is abandoning its capacity to think for itself and is instead cutting and pasting from our Five Eyes partners. The drumbeat from officials has been consistent on this for some time. What do we think of our former Prime Minister suggesting we're abandoning our defence policy? And isn't it interesting that the person abandoning it doesn't seem to be national? It's actually Labour abandoning.
Well, that makes her words more trenchant. At least it's not just partisan. But I think, of course, you're really just playing to old tropes, because New Zealand's small. So New Zealand's going to be second fiddle or third fiddle or whatever. So to say failing or losing its ability to think for itself is really playing into very old stereotypes.
I'm playing into the stereotypes that saw the Steinlager ad with a plucky little bunch of Kiwis in 1973 standing up to France. That's the sort of tropes I'm playing up to there, Peter. Keeping with America, because we're going to move on to now BlackRock. It's a big American company. Its chairman's a guy with a brilliant name, Larry Fink.
Yep.
Peter, there's a couple of $1 billion investment fund. I know that some people say it's a takeover of New Zealand by the WEF. We're not those people. What is basically happening with this BlackRock deal that's not really a deal, but maybe we're going to get some windmills out of it?
Well, maybe BlackRock will put its name on the All Blacks jersey too, right? Didn't that right after the global financial crisis, right? Immediately we got the insurance company that was responsible for the global financial crisis to back the All Blacks. So I remember that pretty quickly. AEG, right? Or AIG. What do I think here? I think actually this is an interesting notion. That is, I think BlackRock is identifying lots of capital, billions of dollars, that would like to feel good in its heart about where it's going to invest, and it's on the sideline. So involving New Zealand's interest in its own infrastructure and clean green, you're likely to get with BlackRock investment you might not get from outside New Zealand that feels safe through BlackRock of helping New Zealand develop its green infrastructure. That's the plus. That's the best I can spin this.
As the punter on the street, Liam, did this news hit you? Are you worried?
I'm not worried about it. I only found out last night because I went to one of the Communist Party meetings, and I don't normally go.
No, that's all right.
But I went because
deep cover.
Because there was a man called Brett Christopher talking about it, and he's a socialist, and even he was an advocate for the BlackRock investment, because he said it's just not going to happen any other way.
Well, I think the general conspiracy is that it is a communist takeover, by the way, when it comes to conspiracies about BlackRock. I think BlackRock is, we're not going to go into that.
It's a communist capitalist. It's
really it's more your sort of takeover of society and make everyone have 5-minute showers or face execution. I think that's
look, there certainly are questions then. When investors have money involved, then they're going to have influence. And right, BlackRock is an extremely powerful international corporation. And if BlackRock's saying, look, we must get 5 or 4 or 6 or 7% return on our investment, then that may involve making decisions that would be short-term or quarterly even for bottom line, as opposed to future generations of citizens of Aotearoa. So I think there you actually could find some real conflict.
Why are they investing here of all places?
I think the reason is that there's a lot of money, billions of dollars, that's looking for heartfelt investment. Right. So obviously no one's investing in tobacco companies anymore, but investing in Exxon or Mobil or BP seems dubious as well for some people. I have no money to invest, so it's no issue for me.
Okay. I think we use the words conscious capitalism, or
that's right.
It's something I hadn't heard of. Can we just kick out briefly what conscious capitalism is?
Well, some people would say it's oxymoronic. So first of all, I imagine that our communist friend here would say it's oxymoronic. But I think
it was deep cover, Peter. He's not actually a communist. We don't have communists on this particular podcast. Thanks. Yeah.
But to say that people used to, I think about their portfolios and not think about their conscience, that they were hermetically sealed. And I think there's been a great move for the last 15, 20 years, maybe a generation, of saying, no, actually the way you invest your money is in fact essential to changing the world the way you want it to go. So bring your conscience back into your investing, even if that means that your investments return less. some might again argue, if you're investing and you're looking for a return, then you're part of the problem. But others would say more pragmatically, no, infrastructure investment, particularly that is green, is the number one way of fighting what your conscience, the bite of conscience, they say in German, and that is that you're using too much carbon.
I think I heard BlackRock might be rebuilding Ukraine at some stage when they stop the fighting. So let's just finish. So we had a bit of geopolitics.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear
I
that.
just want to kick two very quick issues in. Cell phones in schools, good or bad?
I can detest it as a teacher. I despise cell phones in schools.
So it's good. Good. We like that.
Oh, look, I don't think it should be the government should be banning them in schools. I think it should be a school by school issue. But as a teacher, I detest it.
So it's personal against cell phones. But Peter, not too many cell phones going off in the lecture theatre, one would hope. But that would be frog marched out by security, no?
You know, the main issue with cell phones is that we now have a generation of people who have memories the size of a fruit fly. So we'll have to deal with that wherever we have the cell phones. Bedrooms, toilets, educational facilities, wherever it is. Everyone, we have this new social experiment that says you cannot remember anything because you're going to be distracted by your phone instantly all the time. So I just assume not have them.
I'm going to go old school. I quite like the fact there's no cell phones in schools because I didn't even, it's not like I had it, like your classic old dial-up at school. So if I didn't have it, why should young people have them?
Yeah.
And just the last thing is there was a poll out today, and you'll be probably watching this on the weekend. It showed New Zealand first on about 5.8%. Labour is dropped to 27%. This is a curious. We're having polls left, right and centre. Do we think they're going to change? Do we think Chris Hipkins is going to race in and be at 40% in the next couple of weeks with some powerful policy, or do we think it's probably just going to stay about the same?
The only analysis that I've read on this is that Labour was like they're convinced. They've accepted the fact that they're going to lose, but they're happy about that the margin is going to be a lot less than they were expecting. They're
on the Titanic and they've got enough lifeboats.
Yeah.
But the ship is going down.
And so I think they've conceded defeat, but slightly happy that it's not as bad as they were expecting.
Okay, well,
which is not.
I wonder if things would change if one of the major candidates was indicted. Because in the United States, we have one of the major candidates of the two parties under indictment and still running. So I wonder if Chris Luxon were indicted, that might change things.
From what I know of Chris
Probably
Luxon, I don't know him personally. He is a God-fearing man. Well, they haven't been to that church for a few years, so I'm picking that Christopher Luxon isn't going to be indicted for any particular Trump-like activities. And with that scurrilous and potentially libelous attack on any politicians, we're wrapping up Politics from Canterbury. Kia ora.